Hi, sir. Good evening.
Hi,
Welcome to
good
our
evening.
offices.
Thank you.
So, just to introduce you, this is our first flagship podcast from Hammurabi and Solomon, the global committee team, which we are starting. And we are extremely privileged that we got to start our first flagship podcast with you.
I thought I am privileged
That is
to
too
be
much of our
there on
credit,
the
sir.
top of your list.
This
I don't
has
know whether I
been
deserve it or not, but then I'm so elated and delighted to be there where you put me.
this is of extremely a good starting point for us. We are doing in Hammurabi and the kind of work that Hammurabi and Lex Port, so with you we are starting with Shweta ma'am and you, sir. And that is why, since you agreed to help us, and especially since it is a tariff issue that we are going to start with, given your expertise for the last 2 decades in the whole
3 decades.
My apologies, 3 decades. So this conversation is going to be so enriching for us, especially in the turmoil that we see today. It is very important for us to understand from a legal perspective the whole game when we are talking about tariff, especially with India and US. Is it more of a tit for tat? Do you think that is happening? How is it? So throughout the podcast, what we hope to achieve towards the end is to understand first that how the tariff pans out on a large scale, not only from the geopolitical perspective, but from local traders, from the market, from the growth of our manufacturers, from the growth of our industries, and thereafter embarking and continuing with what we have traditionally known as localization. So, from you, sir, we would first try to have an understanding of the whole game of tariffs, why the countries inter se they impose it, and how it starts. Yes, sir.
Look, first of all, let us understand what tariff is, right? So, trade is as old as civilization. Right? The trade can be domestic trade within the same village, town, city, state, etc., or between different villages, different cities, different states, interstate, as we call it.
Right.
And then when the countries become bigger, then global, then you have international trade, which takes the form of imports and exports of the country. Right? So there's always a comparative advantage of every country in certain products, in certain services, depending upon its natural resources, handicrafts, your flair for doing making some products, etc. So depending on that, you can definitely create economies of scale. So when you are able to create economies of scale, then you are in a position to export at competitive rates. And when a product gets into the other country, right? So the consumers will get the benefit of consuming those products. It happens to and through, etc. So therefore, sorry, when this happens, international trade has many dynamics to it, many angles to it, but tariff is the most important angle in the sense that every country needs revenue to run its affairs.
Right.
And that revenue comes from different sources. It can be direct tax revenue, which is imposed on corporates, individuals from different sources of income. As you know it,
Yes.
we all pay direct taxes.
Absolutely.
Similarly, there are indirect taxes, that's other buckets under which governments collect tax. Okay, all capital expenditure of the government, revenue expenditure of the government is funded mostly by the taxes. So indirect taxes, you have domestic taxes, where some countries call it VAT, some countries it is GST, but eventually it is on trading of goods and services, those taxes are imposed. And there are different kinds of levies, different kinds of rules governing those levies. We are not getting into that. Right now, we are talking about tariffs in the international trade domain and mostly on imports. Generally, no country wants to impose taxes on exports because you want to export goods and not taxes. If you impose tax on exports, your exports will start becoming expensive and you won't be competitive in the international world. But you can regulate your imports by imposing what is called customs duties, right? So the customs duties also of different kinds. We'll not get into the technicalities of those different kinds of customs duties. But this is a source of revenue for the government for funding its budget planning, etc. And also creating some kind of a barrier. Because the moment you import things, your foreign exchange situation gets adverse. All your foreign exchange is there with you, has to be paid in order to buy those goods from those countries. Okay, so both these things are balanced by the governments. One, revenue source. Two, control the imports into the country and save foreign exchange. I mean, from the macroeconomic perspective, this is the thing.
Right.
So tariffs, by and large, every country imposes, less, more, or whatever.
Correct.
Prior to 1994, that is the Uruguay round of negotiations under WTO, right? So tariffs were more or less very free. Every country would impose its own tariffs. We had duties to the range of 100%, 150%, not less than 30%, right? So it was humongous tariffs or import duties on imports into India. If I talk about Indian perspective, it's a huge burden.
Absolutely.
If you're an industrialist, or if you're a trader, if you're a manufacturer, whatever you, even for personal consumption, you have to pay a humongous amount of taxes.
Right.
Sometimes taxes are more than the value of the goods themselves, right? So therefore, the countries got together in Uruguay and they formed what is called GATT,
Right.
General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, right?
Yes.
So that was called Uruguay round of negotiations, and many agreements were signed. And one of the agreements was relating to trade in goods. Okay, when you talk about trade in goods and international trade, then comes these tariffs.
Right.
So therefore, there the countries decided that, look, let us not kill each other. It's the whole world is a village.
Right.
Let's help each other. Let's have certainty on taxes. Let's come to an understanding that we'll have ceiling. We won't impose taxes more than this if it's a fair trade, right? And also different rules on international movement of goods and things like that.
Absolutely.
So all these were agreed upon in the WTO round negotiations. Uruguay round negotiations of GATT. GATT became WTO later on, actually. So we are bound by some rates.
Right.
Okay. However, the tariffs, apart from being a part of the multilateral treaty under WTO, also become a hand tool for geopolitics, as we are seeing today in the case of US, not only for India, because it all started with the discomfiture in relationship between US and China.
Yes.
I think China, they were totally dependent upon China.
Yes.
So Trump wanted to create some kind of a tariff as a tool for international politics.
I believe, sir, that for US and India against the Chinese market, we had something, the Quad, which was traditionally to fight off the Chinese incursion into the US market.
Correct.
But then we see the whole shift and the understanding of a penalty tariff that US comes in the form of 25% on Indian for India, and this is where I believe we would like to learn more, because like you rightly said, GATT, Uruguay rounds happened, then WTO. There was always the concept of the MFN clauses. Where do all of them, they go to the trash when it comes to something like a penalty? Then there is a reciprocity going up to 50%.
When you want to, when you get certain leaders, when you want to show one-upmanship, then no logic, no agreement, no you try to cross all over that, because the agreements, multilateral, unilateral, are man-made. Right? And geopolitical situations are also man-made. So when international politics and diplomacy come into the picture, then certain logics and rationale
they leave the door.
Are sacrificed. Okay. So as far as India is concerned, you know that we, for a long period of time, we were, during the Cold War time, we were the Russian bloc.
Yes.
Though we were the initiator of non-aligned movement and all, at the end of the day, a great friendship was there between Soviet Union and India, right? And US always was typically closer to Pakistan, so to say, and otherwise also. And over a period of time, by 90s, by the time the CIS countries got disintegrated, USSR broke, and different countries came into the picture. Cold War was finished, and India had a lot of interest in the US and and vice versa. A lot of Indian students were studying in the US. A lot of Indians emigrated to the US. They got their green cards or whatever. They were in the decision-making circles. Most of the tech companies had Indians at the helm, even as CEOs, etc. That trend still continues. Okay.
Correct.
So a lot of brain power has transferred to the US. So they, and also since they became a substantive portion of the US population, they started participating in the local politics. They were in the Senate, etc. So therefore, lot of influence of Indian thought could be seen at different points in time, and the improvement in Indo-US relationship is because of all those factors. Okay, so therefore the trade was also happening. For example, I mean, 88, 90 billion dollars of imports US does from India. It's humongous.
Right.
And it's, I think it's 3 or 4 times more than the other way around. Our imports from US is much lesser than our exports.
Yes.
Right? So it was never seen with those lenses. But when this Russia-Ukraine war began, right, then the relationship got tested. Right? And the Indian government, I mean, economic interests are primary for any country.
Yes.
So for whatever compulsion or whatever diplomatic reasons or political reasons, we continued buying oil from Russia. And that was a very sore point.
Economy. From an energy perspective, buying oil is our prerogative.
Absolutely. But then that didn't go well with President Trump. That apart, a lot of, I mean, make US, I mean, what is that? MAGA.
MAGA.
Yes. MAGA. And also the, and then again the kind of position Indians were holding in the United States.
Right.
Then the kind of student inflow, many factors played there, and also some politics. It's like person-to-person relationships also. So all that, it's a great failure of diplomacy for India. Same is true for US also, because we are interdependent economies, interdependent countries politically, people-to-people wise and economically also. So therefore, when it came to this flashpoint, so therefore it is unfortunate, because it doesn't help anybody. Any break in the international trade, for whatever reason, for reasons which are beyond pure economics,
this would have a cascading effect. So when we discuss a cascading effect, this is what I think we would love to know from you. So this tariff, now it has happened. What are the repercussions that the local manufacturers here would face, or is it time for India, its manufacturers, to look and diversify into other markets where there is no such reciprocal penalty tariffs? That being said, how do we see our imports from the American conglomerates, let's say even in the FMCG sector, with so many retail food outlets, which are American entities operating here in India, and the biggest electronic market? How do we see, given the fact that their operations with China are not going ahead, they're opening up of factories here in the southern regions? So where do we see that from a local manufacturing part for ourselves? That is Indian sector going to boom by sending it to other markets where there are good tariff opportunities? How does it affect my labor market, etc.?
So first and the foremost, when we talk about tariffs between India and the US, right? So the consumer interest is the most important factor for both the countries. But fortunately, the tariff war doesn't affect FDI. Once you have invested into India through the normal banking channels under the FDI policy of India, it's called an Indian company. There may be foreign shareholding. So there are no tariff implications on those transactions. Tariff implications are only on import or export of goods. We have some clients who are into garment space, to handicraft space. They are really crying because the 50% tariff on such items which are not so essential, right, is backbreaking. People would not purchase it. In the US market, if you think about it, any handicraft item or any textile item or any such item is going there, garments are going there. They would say rather we'll get it from some other country which has got lesser tariffs. So therefore, the Indian manufacturers, the garment industry and other industries which are manufacturing these goods which are used in the US market, it will dwindle, because 50% is a huge thing and 25% penal tax. So from that perspective, it's backbreaking. The saving grace, however, is that Annexure 2, which they have given the exemption list in the tariffs, pharma items, semiconductors. They have made a list of those items, right? So that's a saving grace. Those industries are still okay because these tariffs don't affect that. It's an exemption list.
Right.
So therefore, if you look at it, the new ambassador of US then is in India. He is trying to diffuse the situation. Indian delegation is there in the US or the other way around every now and then. People to people, government to government, bureaucracy to bureaucracy, they want to diffuse this. It's a stand taken. I'm sure this is going to be short term, right? Eventually, economics would define the relationship. Geopolitical things, I mean, they flare up, like you see what is happening in Israel and Gaza, right? Now, once that is settled, that becomes a non-issue.
Right.
Let us hope that President Trump is able to douse the fire in Ukraine and the Russian war. If that ends, I think it'll be an end
going
of
to be a gateway for a lot
for all these things. So therefore, he's trying to handle international issues which have been troubling many leaders, many countries for many decades by his own means. Okay, so as far as he is concerned, he is unconventional in his approach. You can say he's arm twisting, you can say he blackmails, you can say he's loud or whatever, but he's able to get across his point. I mean, politically and diplomatically, he's able to get things done. If it may be an example only yesterday's event of Gaza and Israel, but if it's a long I mean, if it stays, it's such a great thing for humanity.
Right.
And once peace is there, economics on its own will progress. I feel that this is a prelude to what is going to happen in Ukraine and Russia. If that war comes to an end, then the world would be a happier place than earlier. That's what my feeling is from a political point of view also, from an economic point of view also, from country to country relationship.
No, absolutely, and rightfully said, politics and economics always go hand in hand. One cannot go beyond.
So therefore,
the other.
he is not applying WTO principles. He is not applying multilateral agreements.
Correct.
He is clearly trying to dictate certain things by using tariff as a measure.
Right.
But the whole problem is, in that process, he should not affect US interest itself. Because
Right.
it's also a country. There's a limitation. I mean,
Absolutely.
it's very strong, a large defense force, economic force, etc. But then there's always you can pull something to a certain extent. You pull it beyond the point, it is going to break.
It's going to break. So, from like you rightly said, certain decisions are not being taken into consideration, the MLAs, they are not being taken into consideration the WTO principles. So how does that affect from a legal perspective? Let's say a trader in a day-to-day is affected by these sudden tariff changes. What legal recourse
I'll
do they
interrupt
have?
you here.
Yes.
You asked a question as to how to use other countries.
Yes.
How
A
to
gateway into other
gateway.
markets.
Right,
Yes.
right. So therefore, there's always a concept of country of origin under the customs in international trade.
Right.
So therefore, if US is imposing tariff of 50% on Indian goods, so that 50% remains 50% irrespective whether it goes directly to the US or transshipped from anywhere else also.
Right.
So there's a concept of value addition
Yes.
in these foreign free trade agreements and bids, etc.
Right.
Where a particular level of value addition, say in some cases 25%, 30%, 40% has to be there in order to change the country of origin. Okay, so therefore, if they want Indian handicrafts, right, there has to be, for example, Bangladesh is not hit by the tariff. Indian exporter has to send a semi-finished item or some item which is not completely there to Bangladesh. That value addition has to be there for 25, 30, 40%, and then to US, then you satisfy that thing, right? That is as far as origin is concerned.
Right.
Second is alternate markets. For example, the US consumer likes the paracetamol or some formulation manufactured by one Indian, say Cipla or whatever, right? And the other countries to market, it's just like creating new markets.
Right.
That is always open. You can always, one market closes, you always want to create new markets. That's a principle of business which is applicable domestically, applies internationally also.
Right.
So you have to create supply where demand is, and you have to identify where demand is. So it's a game which you need to keep playing as Indian exporters, Indian businessmen. So you always can do that. But if somebody wants Indian origin goods, then you have to think in terms of establishing manufacturing facilities or some kind of a free trade zones where some activities can be done. maybe in Dubai, maybe in Colombo, maybe somewhere. So ingenious thinking is required. Where free trade zones has to be used, value addition has to be changed, country of origin has to be, value addition has to be committed, country of origin has to be changed and then export. But that takes a lot of time. For small operators to do all these things, it's a humongous thing. For big companies, it's easy because they have deep pockets and they have huge networks.
Right.
As far as smaller businessmen are concerned, it's a hard-hitting thing in the short run.
Right.
But they have to collect themselves, think about it in
In the
a
long
cool
run
mind,
perspective.
come together.
Right.
For example, if a industry association comes together and then creates that kind of an opportunity for all the handicraft manufacturers, any industry you pick up, right? I'm
Right.
giving those examples because those are easy to explain.
No, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So, and then create those opportunities for free trade zones and other avenues through which you can still achieve your target. But then there are additional freight costs, additional labor costs. The costing has to be seen.
Yes.
Uh,
So it has
The
to be an
whole world
entire
works-
diagram
Yeah,
in
yeah.
terms of understanding what your liabilities are, what you can do to mitigate
Correct.
your risk. So when we talk about mitigating our risk,
Hmm.
assuming that a small time trader, even an association for that matter, is
Hmm.
hit with a tariff change like the one at present,
Hmm.
where do we think that their legal conundrum has a respite? Is there a forum? Is there policy relaxations within our Directorate General of Foreign Trade? How do we claim whether the policy relaxation committees they work? Is it something that is a part of my international dispute? Is it decided in a tribunal? Or do they fall under the
Look, I mean, dispute resolution is the last stage,
resort?
last resort. What is important is your contractual smartness.
Right.
You have to make smart contracts where you factor in these kind of uncertainties in the international trade, whether due to politics or due to tariffs or whatever, and make your prices fixed, that any tariff change or any diplomatic change or any political change should not affect your interest.
Right.
Those clauses have to be smartly included by the lawyers in the contracts which are being signed by these companies, exporters and importers.
If you could give us a
Sec-
little bit of an example, like for example, you said that this should not. So a change in the tariff range, change in law clauses that we have already
Look, I mean,
traditionally read.
international trade works on different bases.
Right.
Some contracts are FOB contracts.
Right.
Some contracts are CIF contracts.
Yes.
Some contracts are duty fully paid contracts. Right?
Hmm.
If you are doing a duty fully paid contract,
Hmm.
you're stuck. For example, the American customer wants the goods at his doorstep.
Right.
I mean,
Complete-
carriage, freight,
Yes.
everything included,
Yes.
including tax. You're
Yes.
stuck.
Yes.
Any change has come to you, right? So you should take the responsibility to the extent you can manage. And if there's any extra cost, you should be, because the customer is always trying to be smart.
Right.
If you are advising an Indian client, they need to be very clear that any kind of marginal change also is not affecting their commercial interests. That is number one. Second is how you frame your force majeure clauses, right? So if you don't include the tariff changes into it, now I'm sure all the clauses will get changed now with this
Yes.
tariff conundrum happening today. So as a smart contractual lawyer, you need to look at that clause also. Third aspect is your export trade guarantee and other insurance mechanisms.
Right.
So you have to, the insurance companies have to jump in and sell products which take care of that. Because it's all about hedging your risk. How you hedge that risk?
Right.
One is foreign exchange risk,
Yes.
other is regulatory risk, third is tariff risk. So there are different types of risks. So you need to be very clear as to what risk you are talking about, which risk is covered in which manner in your contracts. That is as far as the contractual thing is concerned. Right? Now coming to your dispute resolution, right? For bigger companies, again, it is okay. To
They can
fight
foot
out.
the bill. Yes.
But for smaller companies, what do they do? So they can only do one thing, that through their associations, they approach the Indian government. They have to have a very good advocacy mechanism. They have to lobby very well. I'll use that word lobby because I don't think there's anything wrong in the word lobby, because we all do lobbying at different types. It's not a wrong word always, right? They have to lobby with the government.
Given
and
the
make
context here,
context.
yes, you have to be
Yes.
part of an association.
You have to be
propound
active.
your case.
You have to be a good advocate of your own cause.
Yes.
And government should invoke multilateral treaties, MFN status, dispute resolution mechanism under the WTO, etc. So those are long-drawn process, but at least there is you have to do something about it. You just can't sit idle when your something is taken away suddenly. These things happen suddenly.
Yes.
So these are arm twisting tactics. So all these things have to be brought into the domain. And if we are talking about Indo-US. There can be other countries also with whom you may have gates or free trade agreements, etc.
Yes.
If they're doing like that, you can invoke those arbitration clauses, which
Right.
many
Which
countries do that,
they are doing.
right?
That.
So therefore, larger transactions the companies themselves can do. For as a country as a whole, the government has to be active. Ministry of Commerce has to take cudgels on behalf of the industry. All the ministries, industry, commerce, finance, have to work in tandem. The PMO has to think this as a most urgent diplomatic issue which needs to be sorted out, because our communication strategies have to be worked upon. Our diplomacy has to be softer. We have to give, look, you have to give some credence to the press because they are opinion makers.
Yes.
Ultimately, if somebody writes a huge article, right, against Indian interests, we have to have a mechanism to handle that situation.
And address it.
If we say that we are very strong now, we don't care, then these problems happen.
Yes.
So therefore, maybe we are strong. Maybe we are not as vulnerable as we were earlier. Maybe we can't be blackmailed and we can't be arm-twisted. But our economic interest lies in sweet diplomacy, where people take us at our face value, and these kinds of things don't happen. Like natural calamities, you don't have control. Other things you don't have control. But these are pure diplomatic issues. Economic issues are always pure diplomatic issues. Your diplomacy is good, economics is also good. So therefore, when economics fails, it means that diplomacy has suffered a setback.
Great setback.
That's what my interpretation is.
No, sir, this is absolutely extremely wonderful to understand. And like you rightfully said, so if I have to conclude in the way that what exactly are we conclude the session, thinking that where exactly are we seeing the US-India tariff head? Like you had rightly started with that, the US delegation is here. There has to be a way forward.
They are working overtime.
Yes, because this 50% tariff today, it is neither good for a country which is sitting on a labor landmine and for a country that requires a labor landmine.
No, the target was $100 billion trade.
Yes.
I mean, in terms of export from India, right? Now with this, I don't know whether we'll be halfway of the mark which we achieved last year. So therefore, first of all, let us pray that peace prevails in the world, right? If there's an end to, there should be a long-lasting peace, both in the Gulf, and in Middle East, and also in the Russia-Ukraine scenario. I think these are the main issues which are plaguing and then also the mindset what give peace to
everybody, every decision maker.
President Trump first, and if because look, it's his method. So therefore, we need to have a very positive view of him, because ultimately he is at the helm of the affairs. So our diplomacy should not instigate him; it should go along with him. I'm happy that there is some exchange happening between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump. So those soft things definitely matter sometimes. And I'm sure these things will, because people's power is too much these days. So they have to be opinion makers. There has to be proper lobbying. There has to be softer things. We have to use media properly. We have to keep sending delegations. We have to make sure that the international multilateral and bilateral agreements are honored and by both the parties, and the tariffs are to a level where it is legitimate. If it is something is not legitimate, it is not going to
stand long.
Last long. But then temporary damage would be so much for businesses which may wound up because your stock is in line, you've bought it hoping for a particular turnaround and particular quantity, and then suddenly something happens, and then you're saddled with that stock, or your goods are sailing, and then though they have a clause, but there are dates fixed to it.
Yes.
I mean, in transit goods.
Right.
But if you cross those dates, then your goods have to be thrown into the sea sometimes. The freight is much more expensive.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? So such things, like, we have to be sympathetic to the common man, the consumer, who should be the king in both the countries. Right. Whether you're exporting, importing, whichever way, international trade has to be fair and on principles which are part of the WTO agreement itself. If there's unfair trade, there are measures like anti-dumping and other safeguard duties which can be imposed by the countries to stop that unfairness. But if it's a fair trade, the agreements and WTO framework and everything has to be given credence to. That's a hope.
Yes.
That's a hope. And it all depends upon the geopolitics and how the diplomacy. We have to have a diplomatic coup, kind of, in order to get things right for our economy. That's what my understanding of the whole situation is.
No, sir, this is absolutely.
Neither I am a politician nor a diplomat, but I feel that being a somewhat quasi-economist, having some understanding of the customs and the trade, international trade law, etc., I feel that lot of credence has to be given to diplomacy and.
No, sir, this is all a game of diplomacy in every facet, even like you rightly said. So, for that matter, even if you know that the geopolitical situation can go a certain way, you envision that in your clauses of the contract when you're thinking, you take these price points into account, you take the change, because obviously this is not a natural.
Let the GCs note. Because their agreements have to factor in these kinds of situations.
Absolutely. It cannot be like a situation happened in terms of a global epidemic, which is why force majeure became important. Just because something happened today, again, tariff checks would become important.
This is something which
should be part of our KRAs. Yes, and this is definitely a knowledge that we should take, and also a learning in the long stride that smaller businesses should have that in-depth pocket sometimes to bear the brunt of it, come up, find the innovative ways to divert their market, find a new market, divert, like you said, the port of origin.
It is smartness with which you operate. Because one is that you get disheartened and frustrated, and then you become suicidal. One is that you look opportunities in these kinds of adverse situations and see which are new markets, how I can turn it around, where is the free trade zone, what value addition I can do, how can I change the India country of origin into some other country of origin, which are all legit kind of transactions, structures, etc.
Yes, absolutely.
You need to have professional help.
Right.
You need
to properly guide, understand the whole
because the businessman would not know anything.
Yes.
So here the role of the professionals comes, that we should raise up to the occasion and then hold the hands of those small businessmen and then try and give the MSME sector that these are the options available, and also that these are temporary measures. Whichever way, if it's a perishable item, you can't do anything. But if it's a non-perishable item, how to do it? You have to also convince the insurance companies to come and in the aid of such situations. Right? It's all of us have to work together, the politicians, the government, the bureaucracy, the GCs, the companies,
sometimes even the courts to understand. They have to go beyond the realm of understanding.
As consultants, we have to give sane advice to our clients.
Economically feasible advice in terms of protecting, because like you said, sometimes the shipment have to go into the sea. The whole concept of paying out demurrages, who takes charge of it? So all of this has to
mostly we lawyers, what we do is that we give a problem to the client, right? So our role should be business lawyer. As a business lawyer,
understanding
we have
to
give a solution or multiple solutions from which the client can choose one which suits his budget, suits his appetite, suits his mindset.
Right.
And which allows him to come out of the situation unscathed.
Wonderful, sir. Thank you so much. It was so pleasure. It was such a pleasure and enriching to know from you. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.